Number 1. I'm telling this story for a friend of mine. It was the beginning of summer. My husband Jay and I were going camping at my favorite place in the whole world. This was a wilderness campground with a crystal clear lake and hiking trails, and a river for canoeing, fishing, etc. This was going to be a special weekend where we leave the kids, careers, and all behind for just some time for the two of us in nature. It was a Saturday morning and Jay had to work, so it was a little while before we could leave. We got to the place we were going and there was only the two of us, so we set up our tent and all of that and did some hiking, had a picnic at the waterfall, etc., etc. Later, we come back to camp, built a fire and shared a bottle of wine until the darkness and fireflies set in. It was a full moon and everything was beautiful. So I got this brilliant idea to do something I've done many times before. I wanted to go skinny dipping in the lake. Well, Jay had already drank too much and he was really tired from having to work earlier that day and all the hiking, and he didn't want to go. Also, there was no one camping except the two of us, and if there had been, I wouldn't have gone. At least not skinny dipping. But I felt grimy and sweaty and just was not going to be able to sleep without cleaning up. So Jay decides to lie down and rest in the tent, and I take off down the moonlit trail, my beach bag loaded with biodegradable soap and shampoo, change of clothes, and some other bath items. So once I got there, I undressed, put my clothes on the root of a big old pine tree, and I dove in. I bathed, swam, and enjoyed the relaxation. It was almost like a trip to the spa for me. And finally, I got out, and I was standing on the shore getting dressed, and I had that funny little gnawing feeling, like when you're being watched. My concern was not a person, because this time of year, we had not seen a soul all day long, and no one lived close by. My concern was that there could be a bear, or some other wild animal. And just to describe the lake kind of just sits in a bowl. There's a cliff, but it's not a steep cliff, it slopes. There are trees and forests surrounding it, and this is relevant. So, while getting dressed, I looked up toward the cliff. My heart felt like it was about to stop. A person stepped out of the shadow of the trees. Just from his silhouette. I couldn't see his face, I thought it was Jay. Maybe he changed his mind about swimming, which was unlikely since when he goes to sleep, he sleeps like a log. Or maybe he was just worried about me. I had been enjoying the lake so much I had probably been there an hour. So, just assuming it was him, I first started joking with him. "Sorry, but you missed a great swim." Or something dumb like that. Normally he would joke back with me or say something grumpy if he was irritated that I had been down there too long. But he didn't say anything. All the while I'm pulling on my clothes still talking to him, but he never said a word. When I had all my clothes on and was ready to start walking back, he stepped back into the shadows of the forest. At that point I was pretty sure it wasn't Jay, so I grabbed my stuff and ran down to the trail as fast as I could, and one time I thought I even heard voices, but I was so scared that I may have just imagined it. I got back and Jay, of course, was sound asleep. I was ready to pack up and go home and thoroughly creeped out by being watched like that. But I could not get him to get up. I didn't sleep until he got up the next morning to make coffee. Every noise I heard during the night, thought it was whoever that guy was that was watching me. Jay was very upset and scared for me when I told him what happened, and we hiked to the place where I saw the guy standing. There were 2 sets of footprints there, from what we could tell. This was one of the scariest experiences I've ever had, and I think about how just vulnerable I was in the lake that night, and still creeped out about someone watching me swim, and watching me get dressed. Anyway, creepy stranger, or strangers. Let's not meet. To this day, we have no idea who that person or persons was, but I will never take a moonlight swim alone again. Number 2. I apologize in advance for bad English, not my first language. So, this happened yesterday night and I'm still a little terrified. My mom decided to take some of her friends, my sister and I, to a cottage to enjoy before the summer break ends. We're in the Caribbean, so it's a really cool place for us, with a lot of plants, etc. We arrived yesterday in the afternoon and set our things up and decided to go out for dinner. When we came back a few hours later, my sister asked me if I wanted to go to a swimming pool. I said yes, and we started to head to the shared swimming pool of the cottage complex. Once arrived, we remembered that once a certain time has passed, all the lights are turned off. It was like 11 p.m., so it was really dark, but it wasn't a problem for us, so we stayed and got comfortable in the water. It was warm, so we stayed for a long time, looking at the sky. The pool was surrounded by a fence and some palm trees. We were lightened by the phone's flashlight and the lamps that were on the path to the pool, so the lighting was bad, but I saw some kind of glowing in the dark between the palm trees. So I got closer to the edge, and that's when I saw a face. It was right there, staring at me. I was frozen, and I stared at it for like 30 seconds and it didn't move, but I could almost clearly recognize two dark eyes in a mouth. Someone was looking at us, hiding behind the trees. I stayed like that for I don't know how long and finally turned back to the fence so I couldn't see it anymore. My sister was talking, but I was terrified that not a word could come out of my mouth at the moment. We stayed for a few more minutes, and all the time I didn't look toward the fence because I was scared of seeing that face again. Right now, I still haven't told my sister because I don't want to scare her. And maybe I'm wrong and it was just a plan or something, but I never had so many goosebumps in my life. I think my gut is right, because on the other side, the fence is at a shoulder height, and it could have been somebody, because there were other residents in the cottages around the pool. So maybe one of them had hid to watch two girls swimming at night, but I don't understand why it didn't move when I was staring back. I'm really frightened because I'm not an easy person to scare. I always try to relativize, but this time, I did not know what to do. Maybe one day I'll go back today in daytime and try to look for something looking like a face in the area. Number 3. This story still gets me even now, almost 20 years later. I was like 18 at the time, and me and my boyfriend at the time, and his best friend and his girlfriend decided to take a drive one night. It was kind of late, probably around 10 or 11 at night. We drove out to this small lake that is a few miles outside of town. It is a place where people swim and boat and fish during the day, but at night it is deserted. There are no houses in the near vicinity either. There is only one way in and one way out of this area. So, on the way in, as we are driving into where the dock is, we noticed that there's some trash on the side of the road. Really noticed it because it had some large items in it, such as a recliner and a hot water heater. And that's pretty weird, right? Anyway, we drove in and got out of the car for maybe 5 minutes, and walked to the dock and got back into the car to leave. However, on the way out, the stuff was now just blocking the road. This scared the living hell out of us. It didn't make any sense because we had just come in a couple of minutes before, and now the stuff was moved. And we didn't see anybody, but it felt like people were out there watching, which was really scary. Anyway, we had a baseball bat and a tire iron in the car, so the boys took that stuff and got out, and moved enough of the things so we could finally get out of there, and we hightailed it the hell out of there. My heart was racing at this point, and we all felt like we avoided some sort of danger. It still scares me this long after it happened. Number 4. For context, we're female when this happened. Back in mid-February 2020, my friends and I were all 15. This takes place in Italy, on a school trip we went on. So the trip itself was alright, but being the dumb teenagers we are, we decided, of course, to push the boundaries. Our school had booked us into a pretty average hotel, low budget. So one night, 2 of my friends asked me if I wanted to sneak out with them during the night and go to the nearby beach. I'm generally quite sensible, but they kept persuading me until I finally gave in. We would only get one opportunity to do this, right? So, we waited until about 1 a.m., messaging each other when to leave our rooms and meet in the corridor. It was only 3 of us, and we didn't want anyone else to know, as they might snitch on us. The teachers were sleeping in rooms opposite of ours, so we had to be quiet as to not get caught. I remember still, though, how worried I was that we would be caught and they would ring my parents. But we were successful and snuck our way down to the lobby. For whatever reason, no one was at the front desk, so we hurried through the lobby and out the front door, not waiting around to get caught. None of us actually knew Italian, so this is possibly one of the dumbest things we could have done. We walked for about 2 miles down to the beach. All smug, we had actually managed to pull off our perfectly devised plan. The streets were completely empty, not surprising considering it was 1 a.m, but it didn't stop that anxious feeling in the back of my mind. I knew what we were doing would get us in so much trouble if we were caught. We had to walk down hundreds of steps in order to actually get to the beach, so plenty of time to reconsider our actions, but we were stupid and kept going. Something I regret now. The beach was really quite beautiful. It was a full moon that night and the beach was lit up in a beautiful soft light. We had the entire place to ourselves. We pissed around for 10 minutes or so, and then my friends said they wanted to go into the sea. I was adamant that I was not going in, despite their protests, so they told me to keep an eye on their stuff. We had only brought a few jackets and our phones. They rolled up their trousers and went knee-deep into the sea. I started filming them and taking pictures. The others would be so jealous, I remember thinking. Just wait until they see these photos. They spent about 5 minutes splashing around in the cold sea before they came back onto the beach and started stripping off more. I could not believe it. They were about to go swimming. They had the genius idea to go in their underwear. I could not stop laughing at this point. Looking back at it now, I should have persuaded them not to, but I didn't understand the gravity of the situation we would soon be in. They both ran toward the waves and jumped in at the same time, screaming and giggling in the freezing water. I stood on the shore, laughing and filming them. Now, while I was guarding their things, I got this eerie feeling of being watched. I can only put it down to instinct, naturally. I put my guard up and I looked around. And I'm so glad I did, because God knows what would have happened if I didn't notice them. 2 men were sitting maybe 30 meters from us, 90 feet, in the dark. I can't be sure as I only noticed them for a second before turning back around, but it looked like one of the men was holding his phone up, filming us. My stomach dropped. I called both of my best friends. They must have noticed the tone in my voice was completely shaken despite my best efforts to be discreet, and they walked up the sand towards me, dripping wet and freezing cold. I told them 2 men were sitting behind us, watching us. I'd never seen them so scared. That's when the trepidation hit us. No one knew we were here, and as far as everyone else was concerned, we were fast asleep in our hotel rooms. These men could easily take us down, kidnap us, R-word us, murder. No one would ever know. I whispered to my friends that we needed to leave, right now. I told them to not bother getting dressed, just to grab their stuff and leave as inconspicuously as possible. And they agreed with no hesitation. At this point, I was really worried. The men must have known that we saw them. Despite our best efforts, nothing could conceal the raw fear we felt and probably looked as well. As we approached the steps, I made a quick glance behind us. A sweat broke out on my forehead. The men were now slowly walking towards us. Fight or flight kicked in and I shouted at my friends to run. Barefoot and soaked, they scrambled up the steps as quickly as they could and we kept pushing. I didn't look behind me for fear of how close they could be. And we did not stop. Once we reached the top of the steps and onto the pavement, we were running on pure adrenaline at this point. Our legs burned. I looked down to see both my friends' feet were bloody, but they did not stop. We didn't stop running until a hotel was in sight. I turned around again, and to my relief, I couldn't see the men. We walked through the entrance to the hotel. This time, however, there was a man at the front desk. He started talking to us in Italian, and since we didn't understand him, we kept walking. My friends leaving bloody footprints through the lobby. Once we reached the corridor, we made a mutual vow to never tell anybody about that night, and we all went back to our rooms. The man at the front desk must have told our teachers that he saw us at 3 a.m. walking through his hotel, leaving bloody footprints everywhere, because that morning I awoke to a loud banging on our door. For the sake of the story, I'll call her Miss Smith. Miss Smith was shouting at everyone, asking who it was that left last night. Of course, everyone was confused and I didn't dare speak up. Neither did my friends. After several speeches made about the severity of our actions and how they were going to find out who it was, I was terrified. My 2 friends finally spoke up and admitted it was them. Thankfully, they left my name out of it, which I will forever be grateful for. The teachers were furious, as you can imagine. They received phone calls home, and they had to delete all pictures taken that night. I always think back to how that night could have ended, how horribly wrong it could have gone, and despite it being one of the dumbest things I've ever done, I'm glad I decided to go, honestly, because it terrifies me to think what would have happened to my 2 friends if I wasn't there to spot those men. Number 5. A friend of mine told me that her and her family took a boat onto the ocean and went swimming. Well, she was in the water and she said she felt this tug on her foot. She didn't think too much of it, so she just kept swimming with her siblings while her parents were watching from the boat. Again, she felt a tug on her foot, and this time way more aggressively, to where she went underwater. She came back up and screamed out that something was tugging her feet, and right at that moment, she said she felt a hand slowly grab onto her foot, and she cried out for help from her dad. Of course, he jumped into the water, and he got her back onto the boat. She said that he told her parents, siblings, what happened, but everyone just chalked it up to her imagination. To this day, my friend is terrified of water, and she sticks by her story by saying a human hand was tugging at her feet in the water. Number 6. Last night, my roommate and I made a last-minute decision to go night swimming at the river in our city. It was around 8 p.m., so there were still a few people hanging around in the area, but it was quite dark. About 15 minutes after we got there, I saw a man shining his flashlight, seemingly looking for something near where we put our stuff. I said, "Hey, keep an eye on that guy," to my roommate semi-loud, and he obviously heard us and scurried away. I began to feel anxious, but I waited a little bit to say something to my roommate. Eventually I did, and we decided to leave. We packed our stuff up and began to walk up the staircase that led to the parking lot, using our flashlights to see the steps. When out of the corner of my eye, I saw a dark shadow dodge into some bushes at the top. I stopped and grabbed my roommate's arm and said, nope, and started walking back down the stairs. I told my roommate what I saw when we got to the bottom, and she said it was probably just a tree blowing in the wind. I started getting the strangest feeling in my stomach that I've ever had before, ever, and I just knew that if we went up the stairs, something bad was going to happen. So, I stood at the bottom and began to shine my light up to the top, trying to see if I could see anyone, and sure enough, I saw the outline of a man for a split second. As soon as the light hit him, he ducked behind the bushes again. Obviously, I went into full-blown panic mode, and I started looking for other people that were there, hoping someone could walk us to our car. Luckily, we found a couple not far from the steps, and they walked us to our car but seemed quite annoyed about it. When we got to the top of the steps, he was nowhere to be seen. A few hours after we got home, I got a notification on my neighbor's app, the Ring doorbell app that sends crime alerts for your area, that someone was stabbed only a few streets away from where we were. I'm 100% certain that this guy's intentions were bad. I don't know if he was planning on kidnapping us or robbing us, but I just know something really bad would have happened if I hadn't been paying attention, and we walked up those stairs. Not sure if he was the person that stabbed someone, but that notification just scared me even more. I still feel sick to my stomach because of all of this.